Welcome back to Strawberry Ink. Today we delve into the tragic shooting of Daunte Wright, a 20-year-old black young man who died at the hands of the Brooklyn Center Police Department in Minnesota. The case is both heartbreaking and controversial, revealing death flaws within the policing system. But it's also a powerful reflection of how tax dollars are allocated to departments and policies that at times fail their communities and the people they are meant to protect. Let's break this down. On April 11th, 2021, Daunte Wright was stopped by police officers in Brooklyn Center for a routine traffic violation. Daunte had turned on his right side turning light when he was going to the left. Wrong way or wrong light, it didn't really matter either way. Whatever mistake it was one of the several reasons for him to be pulled over by the police. A stupid reason, correct? Either you were not paying attention and turned the wrong light on, or you were also not paying attention to your ways or to your Google Maps and took a wrong turn. But don't we all make silly mistakes at some point? At least he was responsible enough to turn a light on instead of just moving with no light. Turning on the wrong light will most likely not cause an accident, as the driver behind knows to slow down. The officer that pulled him over was a trainee, a Brooklyn Center law enforcement officer who was being oriented by an experienced one, Kim Potter. This trainee officer was Anthony Lucky, who had been driving the cruiser that pulled Daunte over. And this trainee had been the one turning on the siren to pull him over. Meanwhile, Potter was in the passenger seat. Officer Lucky noticed that the car Daunte was driving had an expired registration tag in its license plate, and that there was an air freshener hanging from his rear view mirror, which was a violation under Minnesota's traffic laws. Daunte had just moved away from Chicago, the most visited city of Illinois, and he was most likely not aware of this law. It is important to not be so hard on people who are new to the area. But at the same time, it's understandable that the officer was unaware that Daunte was a new resident of the state of Minnesota. When Officer Lucky approached the car, Daunte complied and gave his name. However, he did not have a driver's license nor an insurance card with him. Therefore, Lucky returned to the cruiser to see what could be done at this point. He called for backup. Meanwhile, Daunte was doing a phone call as well, calling his mother. Then the department's chief, who was their supervisor, arrived at the scene by himself. This was Chief Tim Gannon of Brooklyn Center. Gannon identified Daunte Wright and noticed that he had open arrest warrants for failing to appear in court. This was for a case of carrying a gun without a permit, a weapons violation, and a gross misdemeanor. He also had a protective order against a woman, and that there was a woman right next to him. This was his girlfriend, Elena Albrecht Payton. The officer suspected that maybe this girl sitting next to him was being kidnapped or was agreeing to a violation. The stupid officers were not sure who the woman was, and they also did not know the name of the one in the protective order. So they assumed it was this girl, Elena, and the officers described her as woman when really she is a young girl. She is not a woman yet. This was another excuse to arrest Daunte. The officers decided to put Daunte under arrest for failing to appear in court and being suspected of violating a protection order. They approached the car once again, Officer Lucky to the passenger seat window where Elena was sitting. Officer Potter and Chief Gannon to the driver's seat window where Daunte was sitting. Lucky informed Daunte that he was under arrest and walked over to the driver's door, opening it. Daunte stepped out. He was unarmed and put his hands in his back. As Lucky was putting handcuffs on him, Daunte began to resist. Potter grabbed paper from Lucky with her right hand and moved it to her left hand. During this wild scene, she was worried about a piece of paper. Daunte succeeded in breaking free and got back into the car. He was going to flee once again. So many names of news reports stated Daunte Wright. This name was on so many newspapers, and he is believed to have been wanted for several crimes. The driver's door window was still open, as well as the door itself. Chief Gannon dived into the car as Daunte started driving away. Potter started yelling, "Taser, Taser," and pulled out her handgun, shooting Daunte as he drove away. Daunte continued driving, wounded until he bled to death, and the car drove off lane, crashing into another vehicle, then driving off the road and crashing into a fence. Emergency personnel arrived, along with a crowd of more police officers. Luckily, no one in the other vehicle Daunte crashed was injured, and their insurance covered its damages. This saved the system from another courtroom battle. Potter then realized she had made a mistake, shouting, "I shot him, I'm sorry." Daunte Wright was pronounced dead at the scene and taken to the Hennepin County Coroner's Office. His girlfriend, Elena, sustained minor injuries and was transported to the Health Partners Clinic in Brooklyn Center. She was released later that day. When Daunte's mom arrived at the scene, he was gone. She was having a meltdown as she was so worried. Daunte was just 20 years old, leaving behind a young son and a family devastated, but what they considered a senseless death. The incident led to immediate protests, public outrage, and calls for justice. At the Brooklyn Center police station, Potter claimed that she mistakenly shot Daunte Wright and thought she was using her taser instead of her handgun. What a stupid excuse, the dumbest one I've ever heard. Get this. Officer Kim Potter was a 26-year veteran in her department, an officer training new officers, a college graduate, obviously a police academy graduate as well, a police explorer, and she had been a certified taser operator. This is a clear example of human stupidity. And this shooting, which occurred during the Derek Chauvin trial of the George Floyd case, a Black Lives Matter trial viewed by nearly the whole country, helped publicize this shooting as it was a white officer shooting a black person. Therefore, all over TikTok and YouTube, this shooting was being discussed, and it sparked Black Lives Matter protests, mainly outside of the Hennepin County Courthouse, where protesters were waiting for the Derek Chauvin verdict. They were also making announcements against the Brooklyn Center Police Department for the death of Daunte Wright. Days after the shooting on April 13th, Kim Potter and Tim Gannon resigned from the Brooklyn Police Department under orders of the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. The following day, Potter was charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter. She was the only officer involved facing criminal charges. Just 2 state charges, no indictments nor extra federal offenses. Kim Potter, accompanied by her private attorney, Errol Gray, surrendered to the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office headquarters to be processed. She was then booked into the Hennepin County Jail and hours later released on a $100,000 bond. Shortly after, Potter appeared before Judge Paul Scoggin and pleaded not guilty. Judge Scoggin left her bond as it was and declared that no changes had to be made with it. The prosecutors in charge of working this case was Matthew Frank. He sought to send Potter to prison for decades. Days after she was charged, Daunte Wright's funeral services were held at the Shiloh Temple in Minneapolis. Visitation on the 21st of April, a day after Derek Chauvin was found guilty, and celebration of life on the 22nd. He was afterwards cremated. The ashes were given to his mother and are currently in the mother's house. In December 2021, Kim Potter was put on trial. As the trial wrapped up, Christmas was on its way. During the trial, Potter testified that she mistakenly grabbed her handgun instead of her taser, claiming that she intended to tase Wright, not kill him. Despite her remorse, the tragic consequences of her actions could not be ignored. The day before Christmas Eve, the trial's 14-person jury, meaning 12 members and 2 alternates, found Kim Potter guilty of both first-degree manslaughter and second-degree manslaughter. Her defense explained that she's a Catholic and that she deserves to be free at least for Christmas. However, Judge Regina Chu did not allow that and immediately remanded her into custody after the verdict was read. Therefore, she was returned to the Hennepin County Jail. In her mugshot, she was seen smiling. 2 months later, Judge Chu, who had conducted the trial, sentenced Kim Potter to 2 years in prison. She served the sentence at the state prison in Shakopee, Minnesota. Potter appealed her case, but the Minnesota Supreme Court denied her request for a new trial, as well as Judge Chu herself. This judge refused to acquit her nor redo the process. However, the state's appeals court did grant her a chance for parole after completing 1.3 years of the sentence. The United States Supreme Court refused to hear the case nor exonerate her. However, the prison time was not long compared to other inmates with her. Also, due to the minimum mandatory, she would leave prison in no time. She was granted parole and released early in 2024. She has since moved to Wisconsin and lost a tremendous amount of weight while in prison. A total of 3 lawsuits were filed, one being by civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump. This was a federal wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of the Wright family, targeting the city of Brooklyn, seeking coverage and damages. The other 2 were handled by attorney Michael Patton. One of them was related to the death of Daunte Wright. It was on behalf of his partner at the time, Elena Albrecht Payton, who suffered injuries due to the car accident they had gotten into as Daunte was driving away, bleeding to death. This lawsuit as well sought coverage for the damages. It targeted Brooklyn Center and Officer Kim Potter. These 2 lawsuits I mentioned were settled. The first one in 2022 for $3.25 million between Attorney Crump and the city's defense attorney, Jim Rowader. The other one in 2023 for $350,000 negotiated between Attorney Patton and Kim Potter's defense attorney, Errol Gray, as well as Attorney Rowader. Lastly, Attorney Patton handled a lawsuit against the estate of Daunte Wright. It painted him as a full-on criminal. One of the plaintiffs was a woman who claimed that Daunte choked and tried to rob her. Another woman claimed that Daunte shot her in the head, causing permanent injury. Both women sought coverage for the injuries. This matter remains pending, And these cases were the ones mentioned in those newspaper reports I was just talking about. While some believed this was just a sentence, others pointed out the failure of the system to prevent such a tragedy in the first place. Now let's step back and take a broader look at the situation. While Kim Potter's actions were wrong, her tragic mistake is a reflection of the deeper systemic problems within the police force. What's equally concerning is the way the tax dollars are spent to support departments like these. Departments that time and time again fail to serve the communities they are meant to protect. Here is where we discuss what gets uncomfortable. How much of our hard earned tax money is allocated to police departments only for them to engage in reckless behavior, mismanagement, and systemic violence? Taxpayer dollars fund these departments, and yet the public is left with the consequences of their mistakes. Take a moment to think about the excessive spending on training, policing equipment, and various law enforcement related policies that could be better used to support communities, especially communities of color, that are disproportionately impacted by police violence. Instead of focusing on meaningful reforms or community based solutions, much more of this money is being poured into training officers to use more weapons and technology. In many cases, it's a system more focused on control than on community trust or prevention. The funds being spent on unnecessary equipment, such as military grade vehicles and high powered rifles, are being used to create an atmosphere of fear and intimidation rather than one of trust and service. Does the community really need more weapons in the hands of officers who don't have the proper training to be distinguished between a gun and a taser? The answer seems clear. Beyond police spending, let's talk about the broader picture of government inefficiency. Tax dollars should go towards policies that serve the well being of the public, education and healthcare, mental health services, and public infrastructure, but instead, we continue to see bloated law enforcement budget with limited results. Why is it that year after year, funds flow into the pockets of departments that have failed to curb violence or restore community trust? The reality is, too many police departments are inefficient, operating an outdated policy that prioritize militarization over community oriented policing. This cycle of waste, where more and more resources go into policing that does not actually prevent crimes, leaves the average taxpayer footage. Leaves the average taxpayer foot in the bill. This is not just an issue of the Brooklyn Center Police Department or even Minnesota itself. It's a nationwide problem. The tragic death of Daunte Wright and the resultant protests were only one example of how public trust in law enforcement has eroded over time. Public money was wasted both in terms of resources spent on policing, but also lives lost and families destroyed due to the very system that was supposed to protect them. Instead of having funds allocated for better de escalation, training, or community intervention programs, much more of it was spent on more weapons and surveillance. What happened to Wright could have been avoided with proper training, improved policies, and a shift away from treating every encounter as a potential threat. The incident underscores the need for reforms, not just within the police force, but in how we as a society allocate resources and invest in our communities. The death of Daunte Wright should never have happened. Officer Kim Potter's mistake cost a young man his life, and it left a community grappling with the painful reality of police violence. While justice was served in the form of a conviction, We cannot ignore the larger issue at play, the way tax money is spent on ineffective and often dangerous policing practices. Instead of perpetuating the cycle, it's time for a real conversation about how public funds are being used. We need to stop funding a system that fails to protect and serve and start investing in the future of our communities where real change and justice can take root. Thank you for listening and have a good rest of your day. Take care. May Dante rest in peace.